Well, and you were just explaining that latest Bank of Canada Business Outlook survey, which just crossed. And as you look at some of the findings, while there are hiring intentions that seem pretty strong still in central Ontario, when it comes very specifically to energy-producing regions, we have seen those employment intentions moving lower. Now, we did talk with the finance minister, as Amber alluded to, Bill Morneau, this morning in studio about what needs to be done to address Alberta's economic challenges. Obviously, we saw the federal government buy a pipeline. We talked about the future of Trans Mountain and the expansion, and he says his government remains committed to getting it built.
Trans Mountain Pipeline and the expansion, there's a purpose behind what we set out to do, and we're going to push forward with that continuing objective.
And yet the head of the C.D. Howe Institute was on this very network this morning talking about that being radioactive, skeptical that progress will be made. Let's get more perspective on the energy industry reaction to the federal election from one longtime industry player, Jim Davidson, the former deputy chairman at GMP First Energy, joining us this morning from Calgary. Where do we start, Jim? I guess let's just start with your reaction to the way the votes went down last night.
Well, I think that it surprised a number of people in Western Canada. I think they were hoping for a Conservative minority. I don't believe that too many people were assuming that the Conservatives could form a majority government. So I think we're a little bit disappointed with the results. But the sector, the oil and gas sector, has had to adapt to different environments for the last 4 or 5 years. So, we will resolve ourselves to do that yet again in light of these new results.
What does that mean to adapt? Is that, shrinking the workforce, deciding not to invest in CapEx? And if that's the case, I mean, that seems to be the takeaway from the Business Outlook survey. Does that just continue at the pace that it has been, or do you think it gets worse and accelerates?
Well, I think that I was listening to Tara just earlier, and I believe that Husky won't be alone in laying off additional people now that the results of this election are known. I believe that the sector will continue to underspend. They will continue to conserve capital. They will continue to pay off debt. They will continue to buy back shares because of the current level of undervaluation, which is at a historical low. And I would assume that the stocks would continue to meander along this bottom, and possibly with tax loss selling coming in at the end of the year, which always happen regardless of elections, I think we could probably see some continued weakness in that area. It's unfortunate, especially for the service sector, because they need spending. They need drilling activity, and they're great employers in the oil patch, and I believe that they were hoping for a better outcome this morning.
Jim, earlier we were talking to CTV's Glenn McGregor, who was at Andrew Scheer's headquarters last night. We talked about a divided nation as evidenced through these election results. But when it came to Andrew Scheer's speech last night, aside from the fact that you had these two leaders, Justin Trudeau and Andrew Scheer, basically talking over each other in prime time, the tone from Andrew Scheer did not speak to working together. How do you feel about that message that he sent to his voter base last night?
Well, you can imagine that after a hard-fought battle, and although it was only a 40-day campaign, this has been going on for several years in the background, that emotions are raw on all ends. Andrew Scheer wasn't the only one that was disappointed with the results last night. And the Conservatives will need to work with the Liberals to try to build a TMX pipeline And so the fact that they wouldn't work together, I believe, is a misnomer. I believe that they will support the current minority government as long as they can see what they hope to have achieved in their platform move forward, as will the Bloc and Jagmeet Singh, for that matter. It's tenuous at best, and generally short-lived. These minority governments only last, give or take, 2 years. So they will work together. They'll have to work together. The Liberals want to continue to build the TMX, and I think it will actually be built.
Do you think that the market is overly pessimistic about the political environment right now, and that's being just too aggressively discounted into how some of these stocks are trading? I mean, we're still looking at oil prices at $54. Companies, as David Taylor was mentioning, do have takeaway capacity, whether it's in existing pipelines or through rail, which even though it might be more expensive, they're getting those higher oil prices. And because of those high oil prices, they're cashed up and there's no leverage in the system the way that there was perhaps, a few years ago. Does this create an opportunity for these companies, for private equity players to come look around? And are people perhaps too focused on what's going on politically?
I think that assumption is correct. And I believe we will start to see some M&A activity take place now that the results of the election are in. So I think people have been holding their breath, waiting, hoping for a different result. And now that we know the results, I think that we all need to act and move forward to the best that we can. So I would assume that M&A activity picks up in the sector. I believe that the international investors were also waiting to see what transpired with this election, and there's nothing in the results that would cause us to believe that they're going to come back in any meaningful way. The stocks are trading at a historically low valuation on all metrics, and that is why there's no capital being spent and why the CEOs of these companies are choosing to buy back stock and continue to dividend. So I don't see a material change in the direction of the marketplace, other than there will probably be some consolidation that will take place as a result of this.
Jim, real quickly before you go, we talked about Trans Mountain, and we heard from the finance minister on what he says the government's intentions are. Is there one thing you think this Liberal minority government can do that could help Canada's energy sector?
I think completion of the TMX project is the one thing that the Liberal government can deliver in the short term to address some of the egress problems that the industry is having at this point in time. But also, there needs to be clearer regulation on projects and new projects that are brought forward, a realization that a transition to a fossil fuel, a non-fossil fuel economy is going to transpire at some point in time in the distant future, needs a period of time for transition to happen. And Alberta has been the driving force in the Confederation for the last 30 plus years, and propping up the provinces that have underperformed. They were willing to do that. They were able to do that. They were happy to do that. But right at the moment, they are feeling alienated and underappreciated. And my sense is that even though Premier Jason Kenney is a pragmatist and a federalist by nature, he will be forced to listen to his constituents and might become a little bit more truculent than he has in the past, and possibly seek to have Alberta position itself in a more autonomous fashion in the way that Quebec has done so within this confederation. And that will play out over the next little while also. Once the dust settles and once we see how this new minority government is going to be able to act.
All right, Jim, thanks very much for your insight this morning. Nice to have you with us.